Now, I suspect that they are the real reason you came today, that you could get to know Darcy, Alicia, and Dede, and that you can help them understand the stories of their philanthropy in San Diego. I'm going to begin just by asking each of them to tell us a little bit about their philanthropic passions and why they have chosen that area of interest for their philanthropy. Darcy, can I begin with you?
You certainly can. Welcome to everyone today. Thank you for joining us. My husband and I focused our philanthropy primarily around scholarships and more recently the Challenged Athletes Foundation that you mentioned earlier that Bill rode across America for. Scholarships are near and dear to our heart. I worked at UCSD for quite some time. We met in college and had the pleasure of working in student affairs with so many students who basically run our campuses after hours. Kids working their way through school, kids trying to figure out how to put some extra food and money in their pockets so they can have food on the table. And inspired by those hardworking students, we started our scholarship for students who are working their way through school. We didn't think grades were quite as important because sometimes when you're working hard, you don't have an opportunity to spend all that time in the lab or in the library. So scholarships are primary to us. And because I worked in recreation and health and wellness, Challenged Athletes Foundation, if you have a body, you're an athlete. So we try to make that health and wellness opportunity available to anybody who wants to participate.
Thank you, Darcy. And what Darcy didn't point out is that, or I failed to point out, is that Darcy has been our longest standing board member at the San Diego Foundation. Darcy, you're on about
my second 9-year term.
Her second 9-year term. Thank you, Darcy. Now, Alicia Gwynn needs no introduction, but we are so excited to have Alicia here today to tell us the story of her philanthropy. Alicia.
Thank you, Darcy. It's an honor. Thank you, Chair Constant and all the board members for allowing me to be here today, and it's such an honor. Well, I think that my philanthropy really kind of started really when I was growing up, because I'm from a family of 8. You know, I have no sad stories. We didn't have a lot, you know, but we made do what we had. And, you know, we sometimes maybe our lights got cut off, but we were happy kids. There was 8 of us, and we were happy kids. And so I learned the value of giving, you know, and once Tony started playing ball, we saw the need for so many of the underserved, you know. And one of the greatest things that, you know, Tony was all about, we're all about character. Love, caring, and sharing, honor, and respect. These things will help you be sustainable through life. And so that is what we're all about, the educational part. You know, even trying to even do the necessary things for the young people to really, so they could activate themselves in life, you know. So we're all about the character, and we just felt like, you know what, Tony, I've had over 40 kids in my home that we've raised. And thank you. And we were all about teaching them how to become good human beings. Tony's baseball team was all about teaching them how to be human beings, become great human beings, because he knew that everybody's 1% makes it to Major League Baseball. So, you know, these are the things that we were all about, the character, making them become sustainable through life, you know, where they could overcome the obstacles, overcome all these different type of things.
Thank you, Alicia. And I know that all of you will want to join me in thanking Alicia for sharing Tony with all of us for so many years. Dede and I have known each other for many years. We worked together for 20 years on children's health issues. And Dede, I'm really excited for you to share your passion, philanthropic passion, with our audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathleen. I guess, you often talk about with philanthropy and the things that you do about time, your talent, and your treasure. And I think that I began first with time. I was a stay-at-home mom and had three daughters, and lived up in the North County. And I think the first thing I did was get involved with their school, and then eventually I was elected to the school board in Solana Beach. And so I served on the Solana Beach School Board for 7 years. And unlike some school boards, you weren't paid even 1 cent, to be on the school board in Solana Beach. Is just a small local district. It was really your volunteer time. And about that same time, I read an article that there was going to be a new group formed that was going to try and work helping foster care children, because so often social workers had such a heavy caseload. They might have 40 kids that they were representing, and really these children needed much more help. And it was the first class for Voices for Children. And so I signed on to become an advocate for foster care kids, and I did that for 8 years. After that time, I was elected to the state legislature, and I tried then to say that the reason that I believed that I was there was to help the children of California, the children who needed the extra help. And so I spent most of my time there, again, working on issues like children's health and trying to improve the education for all California kids. And then especially to think about kids like children in foster care. And when I think back to it, we sometimes look at how politics is today, and seems to be a kind of a very, very difficult time. But foster care was something that really received bipartisan support. Republicans and Democrats alike understood that the foster care children needed our help. At the same time, while I was in the legislature, my husband was busy doing a lot of volunteer activities, and he chaired the Little Hoover Commission, which did a number of reports on foster care kids. Again, gave me a chance to learn even more about what was going on in this state. And then he chaired the County Juvenile Justice Commission, so I began to see what happens to children when the system fails them, where they wind up. And so after I was no longer in the legislature, and we now had resources and were retired, then it became a time where we could actually provide money for the causes that we cared about. And so we have focused our efforts primarily then on foster care programs like Voices for Children or Just in Time, and again on different educational programs, especially trying to provide money for children in underserved areas.
Thank you, Dede. There's a general theme here that you're hearing, and this is about making an investment in our youth. As we think about the future of San Diego, we're going to leave this community to these children, and these investments that we're making today are going to benefit all of our children in the future. So thank you. So you won't be surprised when I tell you that we all got together for lunch and talked about what we wanted to talk about today. And so I'm going to ask a question, and I think these ladies are going to just riff off of each other for a moment. So anybody who'd like to jump in, I'd really love to hear about what you've learned, what the primary lesson that you've learned from your philanthropy, from your charitable giving, that you'd like to share with the audience. Who wants to jump in? Go, Darcy.
At me. I think one of the things that I learned with scholarships, had the opportunity to work with both the San Diego Foundation Scholarship Committee and at the university, is that I remember a young girl, she had 6 kids in her family. They were living in a small trailer, and she got this great $5,000 scholarship in addition to her financial aid. And it was for tuition. Well, she had already had her tuition covered in another way, but she still had all these fees, and she still needed to buy a computer to go to school, and she still needed room and board, and she still needed, but this scholarship wouldn't cover any of those things. One of the scholars, so learning to broaden, for academic purposes, still going to go to the bookstore, or for them to eat on campus, or, for them to be able to get health insurance as a student. Those are all fee-based things. So I learned as a donor that, trying to keep it as broad as possible in the scholarship realm was really, really helpful. Another young lady, she got one that was for educational purposes, and it said, okay, you have $2,500 that you can spend at the bookstore. You go ahead and buy it, whatever you need, and we'll reimburse you. What child who's a high school senior has $2,500 that they can, they'll just put it on their credit card? They didn't have a credit card. She didn't even have a checking account. So I think one of the big things that I've learned is as donors, we want to make sure that our money is used wisely, but we have to be really careful that we aren't putting hurdles in place to make it really difficult for the people we want to benefit to access that assistance.
I think that's very, very important. I don't know what you want to call you, maybe throughout their college matriculation or their college tenure. I think, and not just college, I think it's so important when you take on that particular group or that underserved. It's important that you allow yourself to get your hands dirty, which I love about you, Kathy, because I always see you in every community, inclusive community building. And I think it's so important to go all the way with you, with them. I'm reminded of one of the young ladies that was in our character education program, and she went on to college. And she had everything, like Darcy said, she had everything, but she said, Miss Gwynn, I don't have any money to get something to eat. And right then and there, I said, okay, I put a little fund for her to eat. And that young lady saved every receipt. I didn't ask her to, but she said, I got a Coke. I really wanted the Coke. She really worked hard. So it's so important that you go along with these kids. Now you carry your tenure with them. It's important because we don't understand the obstacles. I know for myself because when I started at San Diego State, I had to get a job. My first job, and I was running track. And I had to study. I had to keep my grades up. And guess what? I had to go to work at midnight to 8 in the morning, and I drove a forklift unloading 40-foot rigs and stuff like that. And then I had to go back to school, and then I had track practice. So there was really no time. So I understand how it is when you don't have, when you hear about these athletes and all these kids, they're on scholarship, it looks good, they sound good, but they really lack, and that's what I think, the carrying out the tenure with that particular person or with the group or the underserved is very, very important.
Yeah, there's some interesting barriers to educational attainment that we don't often think about. We think tuition and books and fees, but it's what allows you to be able to afford to stay there and be there that is so crucial.
And if you can actually take this to foster care children, do you know when foster care children, when they age out of the system, they age out of the system. One day they can be in a home, and the next day they can be literally homeless. So when you look at the statistics about foster care children who even finish their high school education, let alone have any success in college, it's just such a very small number. And one of the things that I learned first in the legislature was that many of these kids at 18, they aged out. What about health care? They had no health insurance. And so the legislature actually adopted legislation so they could continue on and receive health care until they were 21 years old. The other thing we often talked about, I think about if you look around at a room like this, how many of you, when your children turned 18, did you stop doing anything for them? These kids literally often have nothing and don't have continued support. And so when you look at an organization like Just in Time, it is providing housing, furniture, scholarships, things to help them continue on after the time that they're 18 years old and no longer receive foster care.
You know, it was so interesting to hear what you said for me, Dede, was that we have to do so much and want to do so much for people today, for especially students and young people. But what was really critical that Dede talked about was the policy change, the systems change that really allowed for these students or these young people, these foster youth, to be able to have continued support beyond their 18th birthday. And oftentimes as philanthropists, we think about what we're doing for somebody today, but there's a great opportunity for you to impact the lives of people in the future by becoming engaged and involved from a policy level. Darcy.
And you know, some of you are supporters for environmental causes. Some of you, this work with education or health and human services resounds with you. Other people would be more involved in the advocacy, and they're going to want me to turn, so my mic, sorry about that, you guys. We are supporters, my husband and I, of the Fund for the Future at the San Diego Foundation. And the example I often give is on cyberbullying. You know, 20, 30, 10 years ago, we may not have thought of that as a significant issue for our communities. And now, where does it land? Is it a technology issue? Is it a privacy issue? Is it a communications issue? Is it an education issue? You know, what is it? And the Fund for the Future will be dealing with things that we can't even imagine right now. And maybe there are policy things that really need to be addressed in the future, because who knew what this zoning law meant to X community? It might be something about environment that we learned that by linking these two parkland corridors, we're going to be able to have some incredible positive change in our communities. So thinking for the future, not just generationally, but our world is changing so fast. You know, how can we plan for that?
I want to just take a moment on that point, and then we'll continue our conversation, but to show a little bit of love for Cheryl Cox and Supervisor Greg Cox, who are with us today, who have really given so much of their lives to help with the advocacy and the policy work, and also been philanthropic. So to Supervisor Cox and Cheryl Cox, thank you so much for being with us. You know, one of the things you've probably noticed is that this is an all-female panel. And my father said to me this weekend, we're having a conversation, and he said, you know, it's really becoming a woman's world, isn't it? And one of the things I'd love to ask the panelists is, can you talk about the advantages you have as females in your philanthropy and your giving back to the community? Alicia, can we begin with you?
I think the advantage is, you know, in my case, in my mind, women rule the world, because without women, men wouldn't be here, because I think we bore them. You know, how you put it. You know, I have this, I think that, you know, the advantage of, I think a woman's intuition we could relate better, especially with the men too, you know. I could say for a fact that my husband always relied and looked to me for a lot of advice, you know, and we were a team. When I say we were a team, we did everything together. We talked together, and you know, he really trusted my instincts. He trusted my intuition, and I think that's what women have. We have a connection. We connect better. We understand better. And I think that's the advantage that I know that I have. I know how to talk, and I know when I don't need to talk, you know, because sometimes it's good to listen. Listen is a form of art. And it's always good to try and listen to the youth or whoever you're talking to. I think that we have that type of advantage.
And you know, I often felt in the legislature, people would say, how is it being a woman in the legislature? And I actually thought it was a positive thing, and I think maybe for some of the things that Alicia is talking about, tended to think that women chose to be in politics because they cared deeply about something. It might be the environment or education, and they were there, I believe, mostly for the right reason. And they also were much more likely to use power to make things happen as opposed to just wanting to be powerful. And I think that thank you, Leon. And I think that, again, like Alicia said, my husband and I talk about the different things that we care about, and then we choose together. But I think often on some of these issues, because I was the one involved in a lot of this, he listens to the kinds of things that I have to say, and then we make choices for what our philanthropy is going to be.
Darcy, what's your female superpower?
I think research has proven we're better at multitasking and juggling the multiple interests. I think we have an understanding that rarely are the issues as simple to solve or to address. There's layers to things. And we're more likely, I think, there's that microphone thing again. We're more likely to peel back some of those layers to get to the underlying causes. So I think that multitasking brain serves us well, and I think it serves the organizations that we are on boards of. I think it serves the clients of various associations and organizations, and I'm glad to see that we're stepping into our own.
That's fabulous. Thank you. So we're all here today, and as female philanthropists, but I know Dede pointed that out, that she brings her husband, and I know because Dede has a fund with us, her family, entire family, including her grandchildren, into her philanthropy. Do you want to talk about how you encourage your families to engage in philanthropy? And as Dede pointed out, it's not just about writing checks. It's about the time and the talents that you offer as well.
Alicia, I always engage, my family and I, even my grandchildren, they engage in what I do. If we're doing a music camp, they're there. If we're serving a dinner, they're there. I want them to understand, how blessed you are, and the culture of everyone, the others, and being in different communities to learn to care, share, and make everyone inclusive. And that word is very important to me, community, inclusive community building. And that's why I love you, Kathy, because I've been to many events in many communities, and you're there. And that's what I think this is all about. Your giving is inclusive, making everyone that is in need be a part of it. You want to have that type of impact. And so that's what we always, our family, we still do everything together. There's a music camp every twice a month. There's a character education twice a month, and I always have my grandchildren. They're there too. My son is there, my daughter is there. So we all try to work together. Whatever that we see the need, we try to have an impact on helping in that need.
I don't know, Alicia puts me to shame. That's wonderful. I do think that not only personally, but I do like the idea that schools and education is about much more than just learning the reading and writing. That I like it when I see schools who actually require volunteer efforts, that young people actually have to participate and be a part and to understand, because again, most of our children are extremely lucky, are extremely fortunate, and they have no idea how other kids live. I served for a number of years on the Gompers Charter School Board, again, a school in a very poor part of San Diego. And when we talked about it, we would say, there were children in this school, now this is in Southeast San Diego, who had never seen the ocean. They had never been to the zoo. They just had not had the opportunities that so many other people have. And so I think, again, making not only ourselves, but the younger generation appreciate and understand what they need to do to give back to the whole community.
Darcy, I know you've been talking about you and Bob and your philanthropy. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, I think the choice, Dede, you brought up earlier, time, talent, or treasure, right? for those of you who know my husband, he spends an awful lot of time on his bike riding for Challenge Athletes Foundation. And last year, I volunteered to go with him. I think it was his 7th year, but my first, to ride a tandem from San Francisco to San Diego, which is a really long way. And, it's a really long way. And it was fun, inspiring. I think doing it together, and on a tandem, that's really together. All right, thank you, Connie. We borrowed she and her husband's bike. You get it back now. No. Being together and being on such an inspiring journey, literally. And when you're going up that hill and it's really long and it's the 108th mile of the day, we had that day, and there's someone next to you on a hand cycle that's gone the same distance, well, as I said, suck it up, Buttercup. You have nothing to complain about. So, I think we can all contribute in so many ways, and for kids to be able to donate their time, if you have an organization that you have enormous respect for who's on that board, I don't know about you, but I feel much more comfortable writing a check to that organization, right? Because I know they're going to steward it well. Other organizations, I get involved myself because I want to be involved in that particular cause. Other organizations, sometimes you have a talent that they desperately need, and there's a little bit of righting of the ship that's necessary. I'd encourage any of you to jump in and do that. But there's so many ways that we can give, and I'd like to thank all of you in this room for all of the many ways that you are so incredibly generous in our community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Darcy, and thanks to all of you. I think the story that I'm hearing now is that all of us in this room are fund holders and we write a lot of checks. However, when we have the ability to do that, let's get to know the organizations, let's get to know the recipients, and give of our time as well. And just because Alicia talked about music and her grandchildren, I just want to let you all know that Alicia shared with me that she's working on her 2nd album. So for those of you who haven't heard her first, go out and buy it so you're ready for the 2nd album.
No, they can download it free now.
Oh, you can download it for free.
Yes, I wanted everybody to get the message.
That way you're totally ready for the 2nd album. So as we wrap up for this luncheon, I'd love for each of you to talk with us about who inspires you, who has inspired you over the years to be the women that you are. And it's not just about the philanthropy, it's about the community leadership, what you've given of yourselves to our community. Darcy, may I begin with you?
I think inspiration is it's everywhere if you look for it. I mean, that hand cyclist, he raced across America. I mean, he finished under the time for able-bodied athletes on a hand cycle. I mean, Andre is an incredible inspiration. Our students who are struggling mightily to get an education because they want to better not just their lives, but be an example for their younger siblings or change their trajectory. I think one of the wonderful things about philanthropy as a profession, vocation, is to see those inspiring stories every time we choose to engage. So I'm not going to pick one person, although there are significant individuals out there who are truly inspiring.
So there's inspiration all around us. Alicia.
I'm like Darcy, I'm not going to pick one person, but I will tell you this. I am inspired by the children that I work with, the youth. I'm also inspired by everyone in this room that gives. I always get inspired by people who give because it makes me want to do more. So I'm inspired by the people the philanthropists that they continue to do and continue to give, but I'm also inspired by the children as I work with them and as I work with the groups. And, I had 100 children over my house for a week, last year. And they all spent the night, and we had air mattresses all over the place. But we had a great time, and guess what? That inspired me to do more. It inspired me to, we're going to do this every year now.
I think maybe this whole thing of storytelling inspires me because everybody has a story. And when you see the success that some of your contributions make, then I guess I'm just going to point out two people that are here in the room today that I think can really inspire me. And one is Leon Williams, for all of his service to our region. But not just for his service, but because of his personality, his character, the fact that there was a man who did so much but never made a lot of loud noise, was able to get along with everybody. He's just really a wonderful man. And then the other person I would say is Linda Katz, who I've joined two organizations that she has started because, first because I trusted her, and then because I saw the good work they were doing. And the kind of person who just doesn't stop with one thing, but just keeps on going and expanding. And one of the reasons that we chose the San Diego Foundation is we felt comfortable. We knew that our money was safe, that we could get good advice on the kinds of things that we wanted to do and where we could help. And we would learn about other organizations and perhaps open up ourselves to even more choices than we had thought of before.